Welcome to the Young CPA Success Show. If you're a young accounting professional, this podcast is your ultimate guide to navigating your early career. Join us as we share valuable insights, expert advice, and practical tips to help you kickstart your path to success and excel in the accounting industry. Let's embark on this exciting accounting journey together.
I know what it could be. I did love what you said about, are you even really friends if you haven't created a fake business together?
Exactly.
Do you have one of those stories? Because I do.
Absolutely. I have a story of a friend and I who did go into business together. And it was a lot of fun for us at the time. And it was just something on the side that we did, but it was really successful and we had a lot of fun. And I'm telling you, I'm a firm believer that you're not really friends unless you've at least planned and executed a business plan together. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Let's dive into that, because I think that's a great way, because whenever I think about business and whenever I think about a job, and I always go back to I just want to do things with people I legitimately enjoy. Mm-hmm. And who do we enjoy more than our best friends, right? Mm-hmm. So Hannah, you mentioned that at some point in your life you had planned and executed a business with your best friend. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I have. So I lived in a little small town in South Alabama, and I had just had my oldest child, and I was trying to figure out a way that I could make money, but be home with my kid. Obviously, pre-remote work. He's 13 now, so I didn't even realize that almost 13. So I didn't realize that was really even an option. But I did see that there was a need because, it's the South, and we monogram everything in the South. I don't know if you know this, but it is a proven fact that we monogram all the things. So I wanted, Joey, you have a look of complete confusion in your eyes.
I am just trying to visualize a monogram. I think I know what you're talking about. I'm not from. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, so for me, it'd be JBK. Yeah. And put on something like a shirt or something.
Exactly. Initials on all the things. Well, and I realized in my little town, there wasn't anybody who did that. So I taught myself how to do it, mostly because I wanted it for my own kid. And then I realized I had more and more friends asking me, hey, can you monogram this thing for me? Can you do it? I'm yeah, sure. I literally YouTubed it, taught myself how to do the things. Well, then my best friend and I were like, hey, what if we did this together? And we started an Etsy store and we put it on Etsy and we made it legit. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. We, at one point on Etsy, had over 250 open orders at one time for our things. And it was this wildly successful thing that we got to experience together. And it was just so fun being able to work with my best friend. And ultimately, we ended up it was just too much at the time. Our kids ended up getting older. So we ended up not selling all of our stuff and not continuing to do it. But it was such a fun experience. And like I said, you can't even say you're best friends if you have not at least planned a business together. So Joey, I need to hear about a friend that you've planned a business together, because I'm assuming you have one.
Oh yeah. So this is going to sound, it sounds a little bit like an episode of How I Met Your Mother, and it's because it's true. This has been featured on an episode of How I Met Your Mother, but it also was an experience for me. So I am, obviously, if you're watching the YouTubes, not in my usual setup this week. We are in Texas, where my wife is from, where I met her when we were working out here before we moved to New Mexico. This story doesn't take place in Texas, but the friend who it involves lives in Texas, and we're actually planning to see him on our way back to Albuquerque here in a few days, which will be a good time, because it's, meeting one of the, I think we haven't seen his daughter since we moved, and have never met his son. So getting to meet all the things from your friends. But let's get in the Wayback Machine. We're going to leave Texas and go back to Manhattan, Kansas. And at K-State, there is a very wonderful bar district called Aggieville. And it's named Aggieville because at one point we were the Kansas State Aggies. We're an ag school.
Didn't know that.
We've never won a national title in any major sport, and people love to make fun of us for that. But you know what we have won a lot of national titles in? Crop judging and farming. We are farmers. So again, Aggieville's the bar district. And after standard Thursday night in Aggieville during college, we all decided that we just really needed to buy a bar.
Wow. Buy a whole bar.
Buy a whole bar, because when you're 22 years old and you're living in the college town, what do you want to do more than own the bar that you're going to be spending all of your time and money at anyways?
I mean, it's not a crazy idea. I
No,
mean, there's some logic behind that.
we didn't get very far in the business plan because,
You're 22 and
we were 22, and like the plan started at the bar and then continued on the walk home and then continued as we, maybe had another round or two at home after the bar. Sorry, mom. I was over 21. This happened. And then, we just sort of would talk about it time and time again, but it never really went anywhere because the reality is we all moved to different places. But it really was a fun type of conversation to just sort of sit there and think about, again, what I always think about with business is you just want to do it with people you like and people you care about. And, if you're able to do something fun with your best friends and you do it to where, if you do it correctly and you set the right things in place and know who's doing what and create lanes to where you don't have your best friendship turn into an absolute nightmare.
Exactly.
It can be a really great thing. And that's something that, I thought was really interesting about our guest today, Kyle Geers, learning a little bit more about how he kind of ventured away from, the traditional accounting path at what is, I guess Grant Thornton's a big six firm. So a very large firm, to doing something completely different with a friend of his from when he got started in public accounting. So I thought that was a really interesting thing of like, man, this guy actually did the thing that I always kind of joked about doing. I thought that was kind of cool.
We had to quote Kyle. It was just how did he put it? Just two bros doing some consulting.
Two dudes doing consulting, which
yes.
Again is every time I think about like, man, what would you want to do? Just dudes doing consulting. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's all good.
I love it. I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this episode. So definitely take a listen. I hope you'll get some laughs out of it like we did. And of course, if you have any questions for Kyle, I think you probably will by the end of the episode. He'll tell you how to find him.
Yeah, and that's something, I have a challenge for myself to kind of get a little bit more involved and shoot some messages over to Kyle on LinkedIn and just talk a little bit more, because it's something I'm not great at. I'm the world's worst millennial LinkedIner. I'll be the first one to sit there and say it. I'm a terrible millennial. I'm horrible at social media unless I'm talking about K-State football or basketball, in which case I've got a lot of hot takes. But, please, if you're interested or have anything you want to say to him or Hannah or myself, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you a little bit more and answer your questions and provide some guidance, because, it's important to be able to talk to people in a low stakes way about what this business is like and how to navigate your way through it. So hope you all really enjoy the episode. We sure did. I think, when I was kind of doing some research beforehand, just to kind of get to know your story a little bit, Kyle, and kind of looking at sort of some of the things there was a piece of your path that really intrigued me. And I kind of wanted to gauge everybody's thoughts on this before we dive into like a real question. But I'm curious whether you would agree or disagree with this statement. One of the things that I was told a lot when I was a kid was, oh, go get your accounting degree. Because even if you don't end up doing accounting, you'll still have the knowledge and it will be useful. Mm-hmm. And as you've kind of moved like out of the technical accounting space and more into like consulting on teaching other people how to do the correct accounting and that type of stuff, do you feel like that's been a true statement for you, or are you still doing like a lot of daily kind of day-to-day stuff where you're using your actual debits and credits accounting knowledge?
Yeah, it's funny. If you had asked me that question, the Kyle that just came into the career, right? It would be like, no, 100% accounting. You can only use it for this specific path, and that's it. The longer that we continue on, the craziest thing, and I've started seeing some of those similar posts, things on like LinkedIn, and I actually like agree a lot with them, because it's it's kind of wild to think that, you start, and actually where my journey was, starting an audit, and, spent about 5 years there. And what it was it was a learning experience, right? It was like to see all these different areas of business like that was happening. And, all of a sudden, you get to decide, hey, what areas of the business do I want to, jump into, and what do I want to be part of? And, now we go and, we work with even like small businesses, right? Like I'm an accountant by trade, but like we can act as that like CFO. And, that's a huge thing, a huge jump that most people wouldn't even think about, between being a founder, being a CFO, whatever you want to be, the numbers. And that's something that not a lot of business owners know, or people with other degrees. You having that understanding of what the numbers mean is so applicable for so many different areas. And so, I would totally agree with that. Like start with the accounting degree is probably one of the best areas that you can start with. Obviously I have a pretty heavy bias for saying that, but I think it's a really good path.
Go for it, Hannah.
No, I was going to say, we talk about this a lot with our guests, is that especially as you're coming out of college, you're faced with the question of tax or audit. That seems to be like these two really big buckets that especially professors and people in our industry tend to try to push us towards. So it sounds like you went towards one of those, and it sounds like audit was the one that you chose. But I love that you mentioned that you learned a lot about what facet of the business that you wanted to be a part of in that. And I think it's so easy whenever you're in the grind in that role, especially in your first few years, really, to not be able to see past the grind for what you can learn in that situation. So that being said, if you could go back and tell your younger self something while you were in that role, like what would that be, especially knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So for me, I think I had the right mentality going into it. So I'm an optimist by nature, and so I think that introduced a lot of curiosity right out the gate to say, hey, there's a reason behind this. I don't see it yet, but I know something's going to come out of it, right? And so I know that it's not going to be just kind of this grind from here until eternity. I think if there was one thing that I would tell myself is just to start picking up some other, outside skills, right? With that idea that, it's not just accounting, it's not just audit, it's not just tax that you're going to be in for the rest of your life, right? Like start thinking about future skills. And in my mind, like if I had taken another, like just even some 101s on like computer science or data science or something like that, I feel like I would be, we're doing that now in a pretty major way, but I think you can set yourself so far ahead as an entering accountant if you're starting to pick up some of these skills, right? Because that's where the profession is going, and it's important to know that stuff.
Yeah, I think back to and it predates both Hannah and my time, but I've heard the stories about sort of how Summit got started with, how it was entering the consulting space. We had one CFO in particular, a guy named Jake Grimm, who is I don't exactly know what his title is. He's our resident data scientist, data guy. I think maybe chief technology officer might be his name. I might be giving him too much of a title there. Anyways, what separates Jake from everybody was he was an accountant, a CFO by trade, but he had that lovely curiosity for is this the right software? Is this the right program for us to be using? And that's really, I think he carved out a really great niche for himself at our company, but also kind of helped us carve out a great niche in our industry, which is a lot of people were saying what's the most efficient tech stack for us to use? What's the most efficient, do we need a full ERP system, or can we cobble things together and use this for that and that for that and QBO be the base? What's the best way to do it? And without Jake, I'm not sure we would have really been able to grow in the way we did, because he did have that skill set and curiosity and kind of put those pieces together. So I completely agree with your assessment there that do some other things, take a marketing class. Most CPAs are terrible at marketing themselves.
Yeah.
We're really bad at it because it just doesn't work with our brains. Take a couple of marketing classes, take some other things, some management and leadership classes to kind of round out that skill set, so that when an opportunity maybe to advance in your organization or go off and start your own organization, which I know is something y'all did that I want to dive into later in the show. But when that opportunity comes, you're ready. You've got the skill sets ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I'm kind of laughing when you mentioned pick up a few marketing classes, before you go. So accountant, right? I didn't even think
Hmm.
that I didn't even know what marketing was like until we reached out and started our firm and said, oh crap, we need to, go out there and actually learn what marketing is and how it goes. And,
Hmm.
now like I wish I had that, under my belt so much earlier, especially when you are thinking of starting something new, right? Because if you're a
Hmm.
founder, like you're a marketer, right? No matter what, like if you have an expertise. And so, yeah, I totally agree. It's funny. It's one of the things that we really build into, our firm, right? So I got really lucky having a co-founder who's very deep into the tech side. It sounds a lot
Hmm.
like, the person at your firm where,
Hmm.
he's super focused on how you can cobble together that tech stack, right? And
Right.
even more so, like how can you do that for businesses without having to spend millions of dollars to do an ERP implementation. There's a lot of times where we recommend to folks, they're like, should I upgrade to an ERP? And we say, probably not, right? Like, do you want to pay that very large bill to do something that you can probably piece together with an existing Microsoft 365 package, right? There's so
Right.
much you can do with that, and then we actually encourage a lot of our people to take time to focus on some of those areas, things like Power BI or Power Automate, or that's all just within what you have today, right? Of all of us Excel's using Excel, accountants using Excel on you know Microsoft Office.
Well, it's, I, to your point about ERPs, like I know Hannah's probably worked at a place like this too. I've worked at a place where we
Mhm.
had that massive ERP system. I'm like, guys, we're using like 10% of this.
Yeah.
Like we have this souped up car that can go 150 miles an hour and we're driving at 25 down the back road, and that's all we ever use it for. So it's a great point. Like having that skill to consult about stuff that is, I mean, it's related to accounting. It's not debits and credits, but it's related to the system. That's such a great insight about like where you can kind of carve out some value for yourselves and for your clients is kind of touching on that tech stack.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that you brought up consulting, Joey, because that's a lot of what Joey and I do in our
Mm-hmm.
roles as VCFOs with the company. And I, like you, started out in audit. And if you'd have told me when I started out in audit that would be where my career is at this point, I'd have been like, "You are crazy. There is no way that's relevant. There is no way that that's where the trajectory of this industry is going to go." So I love that you've found yourself in this journey, and I want to hear about that in terms of how you started out working with a global accounting firm and then got to where you're at, focusing more on this advisory side of what we do as accountants.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like earlier Hannah and earlier Kyle would have been really good friends because I think we have
Yeah.
this exact same mentality going into it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of chat on my story a little bit was, started at, graduated from college and started at a large public accounting firm, right? So it was, for us, it was Grant Thornton. I'm based in Los Angeles. And so, started in their office and started in the audit department. Going in, I feel like this is very common for a lot of folks is, you go in and you're probably, a lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm gung ho. I'm either only going to do 2 years or I'm a lifer, right? Like I'm going to be a partner. I'm going to check all the boxes. I'm going to be the best at the top of this firm. And that's where I started, right? So it was like, yeah, no matter what, like this is going to be my path. I'm going to be an audit partner. And, that's just kind of with lack of knowledge of what else is out there, that's where you go. And so, that was the mentality that I took into my first 5 years in audit, right? It was going in, it was just learning as much as I could. Like I said, I think it's very easy to get kind of bogged down with the heavy hours when you're in audit and to say, okay, well, guess I got to plug through this task, right? And it's hard to take a step back and be like, okay, well, why am I doing it, right? Or asking
Mm-hmm.
your senior manager, whoever it is, to say, hey, just like, do you mind kind of like giving me the background on this and what's happening, and being in a room and hearing those conversations happen, because that was like the most valuable part of my career, right? Was like actually getting into some of those teams that are telling you what's happening and like why the business is doing well or not doing well, and why they took on this loan, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
as you go, and I do, I'm biased towards audit. I'll admit that right here and now. But as you do progress and you start taking on more aspects of the audit, I mean, there's a ton of stuff in there, right? It's like you're looking at IT controls, you're looking at taxes, you're looking at, how valuations happen. It's really so far beyond just the debits and credits and, does this number match to that you really get a good sense of understanding like everything that goes into a business, honestly. And so that really like struck me. It's why I really liked what I did for about 5 years. And, you get to see what you do like. And I came to find that, I'm kind of that nerdy accountant that likes the technical accounting side of things, right? I love, researching the guidance. I love like applying it and seeing how you can make that work. And it was kind of funny. At the end, I realized what I didn't like was like auditing, right? And so made that decision after about 5 years, had the good fortune to kind of take a step back and say, okay, maybe I don't want to do this for the next 15 years. What is that next step? And there was a few things that kind of toyed in my head. I'll be honest. I applied to the FBI at one point to see, if there's a path there.
White collar crimes.
Yeah.
I think every accountant dreams of being a white collar crime FBI agent. Because I did the same thing.
Yeah, it was awesome, right? Like, you get out, go out there and battle, white collar crime. Let's do it. So, talk about super auditing in that case.
Right.
But so it's like you just kind of starting to weigh those options. I think that's was an important step because it's like you could continue down that path for a long time and say, okay, well, this is the path that's set for me, or you can take a step back and say, okay, let's reevaluate. What do I like? What do I hate? Do I see myself doing this for the next 15 years? And that's a really, important moment to have so that you can start thinking about going like what that next path is. And so, I did that. I did the FBI thing for a while. I was pretty deep in the process. And then as luck would have it, Grant Thornton at that time was starting a technical accounting advisory group. And it just kind of happened by coincidence, where you saw it and said, hey, I'm interested. And, 2 weeks later, you're on internal interviews. And, then we kind of set up a start date, right? So just kind of with that moment, had the opportunity to, figure out what I enjoyed most, find that path that you want to be going towards, right? And transitioned into the accounting advisory services team over at Grant Thornton.
So you started an audit, kicked around the FBI thing, ended up on the technical accounting side. How different was that? And for time frame purposes, mid 2010s roughly when Grant Thornton starts rolling out that advisory piece, or a little bit more recently than that?
Yeah, I would say mid to kind of like the second half, I would say. So I think I joined back in 2018. They probably started up in 2016, 2017.
Which that timeline makes sense to me because that's when we kind of started noticing it too, in terms of like, okay, we're starting to realize that, either some of these, kind of nuts and bolts things are either starting to be automated. Like I remember somebody coming in and telling us about like the first iteration of an AI bot that you could run that would like do your bank recs overnight in like 2018, 2019. I was like, yeah, this is cool, but I'm never going to do that. Now we've got AI bots like kind of getting ready to do everything for us.
Yeah.
What was the difference like moving into that technical accounting group versus like the nuts and bolts grind of an audit and kind of what that audit track looked like?
Yeah. So there was a few things there. And I think the one thing that I found it immediately was, you're doing a lot of the same stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like you are really just on the other side, you were performing an audit previously, but now you're helping a company get ready for an audit, right? So it's a lot of the same things of going in, seeing how it works, identifying adjustments that have to happen, right? And so I like vividly remember, one time when, I was sitting, at a cubicle with someone, we were doing like a balance sheet scrub and like saying, hey man, this is what is wrong. This is what we need to do to adjust. We'll add this to the list of adjustments that need to happen. Mm-hmm. And, the guy just kind of sighed for a second and I was like, okay, here it comes. Here's the two middle fingers coming to me that I'm used to. And he stopped me and was like, thank you for that. And it blew my mind because it's the exact same thing that you were doing, but it's from a different perspective, right? It's like you're kind of on that side of getting them ready. And I think a lot of us in audit, like we understand the importance of what we do, right? As an auditor, you understand that you really are trying to make a company better. It's hard to articulate that to companies. And so being on the advisory side of that and really kind of coming in as that, confidant, that advisor, I think you get a lot of, there's a lot of value there that I really appreciated first and foremost. Right.
Yeah. I think the auditor relationship should be a teamwork, collaborative type relationship between client and auditor. And that for whatever reason, it never really seems to happen that way.
Yeah.
Which is funny because we're all trying to get to the same place, which is we're presenting these things fairly. It never really seemed to be that way, though. Hannah, did you experience that a lot when you were working in audit, where it's like, you're obviously trying to get the client to the right spot, but they, for whatever reason, don't want to?
No, exactly. It's almost like we were like working at odds against each other. And that was never like my intent whenever I came into those relationships, was to try to I was like, no, I want to help you. I want to talk about this. I want to work through this together. Yeah. We're a team. We're going to get through this together in that way. So I developed a lot of personal relationships with people whenever I was in that position as well. And so that honestly, I think was also very good for me now in this role in advisory as well, because I got to exercise that muscle in that way. I think it lent itself well to what we do now in advisory, because I was able to establish that pretty early on and see the importance of that connection and relationship, and just how to talk to people too, in terms of how to communicate that, hey, we're on the same team. We're trying to get to the same goal. I want to get this done as much as you want to get this done too at the end of the day. And I want to go home. So, for me, though, I did not love audit. I realized pretty early on, I was like, this is not going to be for me long term. And for me, that was a hard emotional thing for me to go through, because I was like, I'd had my mind set on it for so long, went into it, poured a lot into it. So to shift in that way was very grounding for me. And it was just whoa, what do I want out of my career? What is my next step going to be? So I love it. It sounds like you didn't have as much as that, because you were just so open-minded about learning in that way. And I think that's a really great message to our audience, especially as young professionals in their career too, is to keep that open mind in terms of what you can learn where you're at. You also brought up a point that Joey and I have talked about on the podcast as well, in terms of asking the why behind what you're doing and getting in the room with people and understanding how it applies to the business, not just doing the task. That can be really intimidating for somebody early in their career to ask a superior in terms of the why and to get in those rooms. But I think what I know, I didn't necessarily even realize early in my career that now in the role that I'm in, I would welcome somebody to come to me and ask that question and bring them into the conversation. So do you find that now where you're at in your career, that because of what you went through, you're more open to having more people in the room to pour into people?
Oh my God. All I do is ask questions, right? At this point, there's no, I think you lose a lot of, I don't know if it's called ego or whatever it may be, but when I started, honestly, the first year, right, you're terrified. You're if I say ask something, and it's going to come out really dumb, right? And so you sit there and I'll figure it out myself. And, 3 weeks later, you're working on something that should have spent 4 hours if you had asked something. And that was a big learning point for me. So, I mean, all I do personally is ask for feedback or ask for questions or a better understanding for whoever's involved, no matter what level of the team it is. But also, we do a really good job of, making sure that, anybody that is on the team, let's say it's an entry level, team member, giving them the why, right? Giving them the understanding. Cause I think it not only helps them understand what's going on better, but, they get more enjoyment out of it. Cause it's okay, I can actually understand why I'm doing this. And so, that's totally agree with you when it's having that ability to talk. And then the one other thing that you mentioned that I thought was really cool is, not everybody's going to come in and be okay, cool, I'm going to, learn everything I can in this profession. It's not all that common, I'd say. So, your mention of that's a really difficult moment to have of, well, okay, well, where do I go now? And I think there's so many people that, they get to that place and they just realize that, well, I just don't want to be here. Right. And so they make a quick jump somewhere, whoever comes out, right. Those recruiters are waiting for a really good opportunity. and you jump out, you go somewhere a little more blindly than you should. And so I think what I've always told people is, hey, I totally get it. When I was back in mentoring, like I totally understand if this is not the path for you, if this is where you want to be. What I will say is take that step, take that moment and say, be like, what is the thing that I enjoyed in here? Or is there anything in here that I enjoyed? Because it is so much easier going to something that you at least kind of have some interest and enjoyment in doing, and not saying, hey, I got to get out of here. I got to, get away from the hours and fall into something. I'm sure you learn something everywhere you go, but maybe it's not in the areas that you wanted to learn, right, before you move on elsewhere.
Well, and I think back to, specifically when I joined Summit, which eventually became Summit Virtual CFO by Anders as we've gone through the merger. It was about a year-long process from when I first started talking with Adam Hale and Jamie Naw, the kind of the upper, kind of leadership team at Summit. From when I first started talking to them to when I joined the firm was almost a year. And, it started with just conversations about like, I see this here. I have a friend who works here. Like, I see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about it. And I had to sit with it for 10 months before I was finally like, okay, I've bought in. I've kept thinking about this thing for 10 months. If I don't try this, I'm going to hate myself forever for not trying this. But, and maybe there's an element of privilege there where I kind of did have that ability to, like, I wasn't so miserable at what I was doing that I like had to get out right away. But the thing that you said there that I really kind of thought back with me was like, yeah, I really did get to sit there and just spend 10 months like thinking about, well, what would it look like if I did virtual CFO services? Like, what would it look like if I was doing more of the strategic driving of the business as opposed to the nuts and bolts? Like, is that something I want to do? Let's think about my current task list. Like, do I enjoy that part of it more than the other things? Well, yeah, I guess I do. Okay, so this is a good thing to start going down. And just kind of sitting with that for a while and thinking about it was really, really beneficial. And it set me up for success here because I was more okay with what I was getting myself into than if I had just jumped blindly and said, well, it has to be better than what I'm doing now or else.
Yeah. Joey, sounds like you did some serious due diligence over there. I commend you, sir.
I probably drove the guys nuts, if we're being honest, because it was never something where I was like, I don't like these people. I think Adam Hale tried to scare me, which he admitted after the fact. He was like, oh yeah, I try to do that with everybody. I try to scare them away, see if they really want to do this. But it was one of those things where I just kept thinking about it, and it was always in the back of my mind. And those are the things I think, and maybe it goes back to our audit training where we go back to think about, like, if something doesn't make sense or something's still kind of creeping in the back of your mind, go explore it, go check it out. And that was, it was a long process, but ultimately we made it in the end.
Yeah.
Definitely some serious due diligence.
Yeah, I love that. And also, it's being able to have that. And like you said, right, it's, there's different situations where you had that ability to take the time to, really process, but even for someone, I totally get it, right? Like, you're working long hours. You like, the first thought that comes into my mind is I don't have time to think about this. Like, I just got to focus on the task at hand. But, just taking some time, like just being like, okay, on the weekend, right? Like a Saturday or something, let me take like 5 or 10 minutes, just kind of bring it up again, think about it. Right. And then, then you are doing that due diligence, it's like, okay, has it changed from last time I talked about it? Or, is there something new that I should think about? Oh, do I actually enjoy the work that I do? And, maybe it's not as important now, but, the fact that you keep asking those questions and that just pushes you closer and closer to the right decision, I feel like.
Well, I think it's, it's also good to just have conversations with people, right? Like I'm sure, if somebody who was listening to this said, man, I really enjoyed listening to Kyle talk about what he does, and I don't know if I'm ready to do it yet, but I just want to ask Kyle some questions, and they reached out to you on LinkedIn. Like, is that something that in your position you'd love to see that type of stuff and just are happy to talk to folks about what it is you do and how you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, hit me up, please. I think I have LinkedIn posts every once in a while to say, hey, ask me a question, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to bill you for it or anything like that, but it's, just I think the people that are inquisitive and that are reaching out and that are asking questions, like, that's a really good trait for, anyone, right? To say, okay, this
Yeah.
person's really thinking through things. They want to get information. They're not just going to sit there and try to figure it out all on their own. So, yeah, absolutely. Hit me up anytime. I'm
Like
here.
I call it the job equivalent of like going to get a cup of coffee, right? Like it's so low stakes, but it's like just ask the question. Like I encourage young people all the time, like if you see somebody and you're like, huh, what that person's doing is interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like most of the people that I've run across in my life, they always want to answer questions about themselves. Like if someone were to ask me like, Joey, I want you to tell me your life story. Like I will not shut up about it. Like I will just talk and talk and talk because I love talking. And not everybody's like that, but most folks who are, especially those of us who are in the service industry, that's part of what we're doing in service oriented businesses is talking. And to your point, an underrated skill for people to just be like, I just want to have a conversation with this person, and there's no stakes, there's no quid pro quo, there's no expectation of anything other than we're just two people having a conversation, and maybe it goes somewhere and maybe it doesn't, 2-3 years down the road, but have the conversation and network and talk in a way that's, again, if it comes across as someone's trying to sell me something, I'm not going to want to have that conversation more often than not.
Oh, yeah.
But if someone's just genuinely inquisitive and saying like, I just don't understand what you do and I'm curious, tell me about it, I'll have that conversation 100 times out of 100.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Right. It's everybody likes to talk. One, we all like to talk about ourselves. And two,
Right.
like we do want to
Sure.
pass on the knowledge that comes our way. And so, yeah, I would totally agree that there's so many folks that, are always going to be out there and ready to answer questions. Yeah, as long as it's, a really genuine question that's coming.
And speaking of due diligence and asking questions, I know that we, in terms of talking about your journey, we've gotten to the point where you're still at Grant Thornton, but you're obviously not there now, and you've decided to do something different. So, what was that due diligence process like for you? In terms of that's a pretty big move in terms of starting your own firm and really doing something different and branching out. Like that's a lot of risk involved in that as well. So, I'd love to hear from you, like what you went through to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So as soon as I jumped into the accounting advisory group at Grant Thornton, and it was right at the same time where I kind of hit the manager level. So and we had this beautiful thing where it was like a relatively new group. I was actually the first person on the West Coast out there, as part of the group as a manager. And so it's like there's no partner supporting out there, and so you really get out of your comfort zone really quickly. And I am so fortunate and so grateful for that. For me, I was ready for that. I wanted to say, okay, I want to learn new things, right? I'm sure I'm going to learn all this more information about technical accounting. And I did, but I also learned so many other areas of going out and trying to win work, right? Of going out and trying to recruit, trying to build a team, and trying to help put together some policies for this really strong, but young and growing group that needs to kind of start setting some processes in place. And so it was an awesome moment of getting really comfortable with being really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And that is probably what launched me, from where I was at that point was, being able to go into a room. And, I still remember a few times when I went into a really complex accounting meeting with, the CFO of this company, and everybody's gathered around this table, it's me and maybe the partner behind me, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be the one that's presenting today, and it's terrifying. Like you're the only thing you're thinking about is how bad it's going to get botched, right? And so you do that, and hopefully you have somebody that's supporting you in that endeavor. And I did. Like the partners were really good at Grant Thornton, but it was you just got to stumble through it, a few times, right? And I think as soon as you do that, you say, okay, well, that wasn't awful, right? That wasn't the end of the world, and here's what I can do to make myself better. It's all those those uncomfortable experiences that just kind of continued propelling me to the point where we get 3 years later and say, okay, so the things that I really do enjoy, right? This selling, this building a team, this managing projects and people, why don't we go out and do this for ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it was during COVID, right? And so that kind of, there were some aspects where you miss the people side of the firm, and, that kind of accelerated the process. But, it was myself, and I reconnected with my partner, John Ikosi Pennerhose. And so, we both kind of made the decision. We said, hey, we think we can do this ourselves. Let's make this jump, right? And I think with the mindset of being like, well, there's going to be a lot of unknowns. There's going to be a lot of new things that we don't know, but we're ready to take them on. I think that was really just like the key thing that pushed us out to get started and, start zeroed in February of 2021.
Did COVID accelerate that, or did it hinder that? Because when in my mind, I was like, man, what a perfect moment in history to like really just dive into this whole like, well, we don't know anything right now, so we might as well just take the plunge now.
Yeah. I'm a big people person. I love being around people, networking with people, grouping up with people. And so, like my favorite part of being at Grant Thornton was like the happy hours, the parties, like going and getting coffee with people. Right. And so, I was always, before COVID, was the one that was in the office, multiple days of the week. And even though everything could be done remote, right. But it was so nice to be able to go out and connect with people. And so for me, it was a lot of the community there at Grant Thornton. And so that was what kept me for a long time. And, I think what COVID did was, you kind of, you lose that same, you're not going out to happy hours. You're not, having get-togethers. Right. And so it kind of takes away the people aspect a little bit. Like, sure, we had, plenty of virtual happy hours and things like that to catch up with everyone. But, you kind of lose the, the people aspect, and you start to say, okay, well, again, I kind of had that moment where I took a step back and said, I'm looking straight at the job that I'm doing right now. Is that what I want to be doing in, 15 years? And I think the answer there was no, right? I think I want to try and do something else on my own terms. And, that was really, so I would say that COVID was kind of the accelerator there for having us make the jump.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it was for me whenever I was looking for the position that I have now. I found it shortly after COVID. But for me, it changed the way that I looked at the work that I did, because for me, it just proved like the world can still survive all working remote.
Yeah.
I will be just fine. Like I'm like you, like I really love like the connections and the people that I got to interact with through the job that I had at the time. But it also was not the end of the world, because we do have technology that still allows me to be fulfilled in that way in this role. So I knew post-COVID and having kids at that point that it was really important for me in the role that I was looking for that it be fully remote, because I knew that it existed. At the time, it kind of felt like a needle in a haystack, but I knew that it existed. I knew that I could still give value to a company and also still be the present mom that I wanted to be for my kids in that. So for me, like COVID really altered like how I look at this role and like what we do as accountants. And I think it's awesome that us here at Summit, like we were ahead of that, like pre-COVID, like we were already distributed. So I think it's really awesome. But I know for me personally, it was that moment wherein I realized that I could still do this and be successful in my career and not have to sacrifice being with my kids whenever I need to be with my kids. So how would you say the journey has been now since you've started your own firm in terms of where you're at now versus when you started and where you plan to be in the future with your firm?
Yeah. So, I'll touch on kind of what you mentioned there, because I really like that. But, we started and continue to be, we're a fully remote firm. So we got folks, here in Southern California, we got people in Nevada, Colorado. And so, it is that, and I think we've found some really awesome talent from people like yourself, Hannah, that's, say like, I can do amazing things. Why do I need to, should I only be able to work and not spend time with my kids? Right. So we've found 2 people on our team who are moms and are working part-time with us. So one's working 20 hours, one's working 30 a week. And it's like, and they're superstars, right? Like they do so well. And I can only imagine like pretty similar to, what you've seen is like, okay, I got to focus on this task. I got to be really effective at it. And it's worked so well, but it's finding that balance of like, okay, fully remote, but like every quarter or so we try to get together and have that FaceTime, right? So it's that happy mix between the two. And I know every firm has a different formula of it. But yeah, to your point of kind of where we started, right? It was just honestly, it was just two dudes doing consulting, right? It was me and John, and we started it and we said, hey, as long as we can pay the bills for this first year, like we are good, like we are, better than we were before. And so that's where we set off. And so I was doing my technical accounting thing. John's really good on the outsourced accounting controllership side of things. And so we're a pretty good duo to, really help out clients in a lot of different ways. And it was probably about halfway through 2021 where we said, oh my gosh, like I think we can do something with this. We could grow this in a major way if we wanted to. And, so by the end of 2021, we had started hiring. We had our first hire in November. And, to this day, we're up to a team of 8, which is awesome. We're continuing to look to grow the team as we go into 2024. And, we started with what we know, but we never wanted to just be, an accounting firm. So, we had a big push onto, what tech stack do you use, right? How do we automate things? How do we use technology to make, lives better for ourselves and for our clients? And so, the more that we work, the more that we're trying to inject that technology into what we do, right? Maybe it's doing some type of digital transformation services. That's one thing that we do, but also just, the existing services that we have for accounting, like how do I use ChatGPT? How do I use Power Automate or BI to, provide additional value for our team where, we don't need to be doing things manually all the time. So, where we were 2 years ago of, not even knowing how to start a firm or where to go or, do marketing. I think we've grown in a crazy way of just tackling the new things as they come. And, we're continuing to find different areas that just kind of play well with, what we're trying to do when it comes to technology, and things like that.
I think that's great because it's when I think about like how in my mind, when I've thought about doing some of this, it always does start with two dudes doing consulting, which just makes me laugh because I'm like, man, what would I be getting myself into if I just if my best friend and I just decided we were going to go do some consulting, which we've, throughout the years have kind of thrown out. I think we're going to stick to a podcast, Hannah.
I mean, are you really friends if you don't come up with a business idea together?
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking really? Too.
Yeah.
But I love that you guys you started with that and then you kind of realized like, oh, we have something here. Let's start building some infrastructure. And it's, I love the premise of remote work for this type of thing because you can expand your reach so much further than your resources would typically allow. But, if you're doing it right, and I think it sounds like you are doing it right, you're having that nice mix of like FaceTime to, still staying remote. Like Hannah, we've only ever actually met each other in person, 3 or 4 times?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's like every time I see Hannah, it's like I'm seeing my best friend again from a long time ago. And it never really feels awkward or forced. It's just like, oh, hey, there's Hannah, and we're getting to spend that time. And that's such an important thing to invest in as a company and as a team. Like we tell our distributed clients all the time, like, look, whatever you are going to spend on rent, don't just see that as a savings. Reinvest that into your team through retreats or fun things that you guys are doing together and those types of things. It's okay. In fact, that's a better way to spend it than just on a building.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's not an expensive thing to do to, fly people out to a location, right? But it's such a good investment for what it is, right? It's like you actually get to see the team bond with each other, right? And that works so much better. Friendships get made, right? And people are just easy. It's so much easier to talk to each other about a problem or a situation or, and so, we love that model. We're not stopping it anytime soon. And I totally agree, right? Don't just be remote to, have cost savings. Use that, use what you're saving into something better.
Hannah, I don't know about you if you're the same way, but, I was, again, not to use the word, but I was doing an audit of myself. And I was thinking about, I have more friends within my remote firms than I ever did in any of the other places that I worked. And I don't know why that is, But it's like,
Absolutely.
I have more friends at Summit Anders than I ever did in any other place that I worked. And I'm like, that's so bizarre that it's the remote place. But I think it's also a testament to the work that, as a team we've done to build that up and make sure that we're creating opportunities for it. So I love what you said there. And what I tell my clients all the time is, look, if you don't get any actual work done at your retreats, that's fine.
Yeah.
You have plenty of time to get the work done. You don't need to do it. You're never going to remember the work. What you're going to remember is, the hike that you took in Tucson with this person, or, watching your boss get on stage and sing karaoke, which has happened. We're not allowed to talk about it. They put that in our contracts that we can't talk about it. But, it's happened. We've seen it. So those are the things you remember at the end of the day, not the deliverable that you cranked out together. So
yeah,
I love that you guys are investing in that and telling your clients to invest in it too.
Absolutely. You all gotta make a podcast episode about what is happening at those things. See the CEO doing karaoke. I'm sure people would pay for that type of
A
entertainment.
post-retreat tell-all. That's what it'll be.
I like my job. Maybe if you ever see that, that's how you know that Joey's choosing violence. If we ever decide to do
woke
this
up and chose violence that day. That's right. That's exactly right.
We can't see producer Roxanne, but I'm sure she's dying behind the scenes right now listening to us talk about this.
Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking with us about your journey and what your experience has been in this industry. I think it's so valuable for our audience to hear this from all different lenses. And so I'm so thankful that you came and joined us for that. We do like to end on just kind of a different note. And so we want to hear from you. What is the best piece of professional advice that you've ever been given?
Ever been given? You don't always have to do everything, I guess, this was something that I, got hit with as of right now, as a founder, right? You've got 1,000 different things going on. And so it just becomes so much clearer. But even when I was back at Grant Thornton, back in audit, right? I was, you just continue to have more responsibilities, dropped on you. And so it's really hard to, if you're a high performer, you want to be doing everything, right? Like I can't push this away. I can't delegate this. And that's such a dangerous mentality to have. And I've seen people get to the manager level and they are the sharpest people at the firm, but they don't have that ability to, delegate or, trust their team and hand things off. And it's, they don't go any further, right? They're not there for very long because it's so important to, pick the things that you're really good at and, see if you can get support for the other areas. So in my mind, if you're going on, if you're an A1 and A2 a senior and you're saying, I can't trust this for anybody, I would highly recommend you rethink that because, it's important, especially the further up you go of, being able to prioritize and, focus on the things that really are going to, propel your career and wherever you're working.
I think that's great advice. And it's something we talk about all the time too. It's delegation's a skill. You got to learn how to do it.
Yeah. And I'm still getting better at it. Trust me. So,
me too. I fail on delegating every week. I just always try to get a little bit better one week at a time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Kyle, thanks so much for joining us. This has really been a pleasure. And for anybody in the audience who's looking to learn more about Zeroed In Consulting and maybe also just hitting you up on LinkedIn to have that no strings attached conversation about what you do, how can we find out more about you and your firm?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, hit me up on LinkedIn. So Kyle Geers, shouldn't be too tough to find out there, but always happy to answer any questions that come in. As long as it's not an offer for lead gen services, I'll probably respond. But and then the other item is go to our website, right? So www.zeroed-inconsulting.com. And, go take a look. You'll get a lot of information about what we do, who works there. And, there's a lot of opportunities there to, reach out, connect with us in various ways. So.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Hannah, Joey, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thanks, Kyle.
If you're a young CPA looking to develop in their careers, we're always looking for great people. Visit our website for remote work opportunities with Summit Virtual CFO, or find all our open positions at Anders CPAs and Advisors.